Woman, an in-depth exploration of the world of women today with Sandra Elkin.
Good evening and welcome to Woman. Insurance is a $12 billion a year industry in the United States today. Recently, many people have become very concerned because they feel women policyholders are being discriminated against. My guest this evening is one of these concerned people. She is Kathleen Peratis. Kathleen is a practicing attorney and director of the Women's Rights Project of the American Civil Liberties Union. Kathleen, who are the people that are concerned about this?
There are a lot of people that are concerned, Sandy. Women are concerned, feminists are concerned. The American Civil Liberties Union is very concerned and is taking an active role to investigate the problem and see what can be done to rectify them. In addition, employers are concerned and state governments that are affected are concerned. They're concerned about what their responsibilities are under various recent legislation and under the Constitution.
What is the basic problem, do you think?
I think the basic problem is the unrealistic view of women that is held by both private insurance companies and state governments that administer various governmental programs, governmental insurance programs. The underwriting manual of the North American Reassurance Company, for example, warns that, and I'll quote this for you, women's role in the commercial world is a provisional one. They work not from financial need but for personal convenience. The subjective circumstances which create convenience tend to change, and if a woman has disability coverage, the temptation exists to replace her earnings with an insurance income once work loses its attractiveness. This attitude about women, that is, that they are tangential members of the workforce, that they work not because they need to, but because they sometimes in their life decide that they want to, is an unrealistic view about women's relationship to the workforce and colors a lot of the presumptions that insurance companies have and the way that they treat women.
How do you see women's relationship to the workforce?
Well, it's a statistical fact that 40% of the workforce is made up of women, and a good number of those women, in fact a majority, are working because they need to. They're either single or widowed or divorced and the sole support of their family, or they're married to men who are making less than $7,000 a year. Those women are not tangential members of the workforce. They're in the workforce because they need to be. The average longevity of women in the workforce is 25 years. It's simply not the case that the average woman works for a few years, gets married, and leaves the workforce for good.
There are many, many kinds of insurance, and we're probably not going to be able to cover everything. But there are two basic different kinds, public and private. Would you like to talk about private first?
All right.
Group health insurances. What are the differences between the coverage that men and women get?
There are a number of differences in the provisions that cover women who hold private health insurance and men who hold private health insurance.
Let's talk about maternity benefits because that seems to be the largest area of concern at the moment.
That's correct. It's typically the case that maternity benefits, or even broader than that, all illnesses, diseases, or disabilities that are related to organs peculiar to females, which is a phrase often used, are completely excluded from health insurance coverage. When they're not completely excluded, the biggest problem is that maternity benefits and all illnesses and diseases related to maternity are excluded or are severely limited. It's not unusual for a health insurance policy to cover all the ills that men suffer, including the kinds of diseases and disabilities that affect only men, but to exclude entirely or to place a very low limit on the maximum recovery a woman can receive for disabilities and health problems related to pregnancy. Many policies provide for a $300 or $500 limitation on the expenses that are incurred in having a child, which is, of course, entirely unrealistic. It costs far more than that to pay the medical expenses of having a baby, and few insurance policies cover that.
What about the female employee versus the wife of the male employee? What are the differences there?
Well, with respect to group health insurance plans that are paid for in whole or in part by the employer, it's often the case that wives of male employees get better coverage relating to maternity than female employees do. That's illegal. Under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as it's been amended, the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission has issued guidelines which provide that that kind of disparate treatment between wives of male employees and female employees is sex discrimination under Title VII.
So that if it's happening to you, it's illegal?
It's illegal if the employer that is providing those disparate benefits is covered by Title VII, and virtually every employer with 15 or more employees is covered by Title VII.
Does it cost the employer more to include maternity benefits for women?
It certainly costs something to include maternity benefits for women. There's no reason to believe that including maternity benefits for women costs more than a number of diseases and disabilities which are typically covered. And in fact, it probably costs less to cover maternity than most employers think. One of the reasons that employers have been resisting so hard the requirement under the EOC guidelines that maternity be covered as any other disability is covered is their fear that it is going to be terribly expensive. There has not been a lot of statistical work done in this area, but those that have been undertaken indicate that the cost of that kind of coverage is not nearly as high as people think.
It seems to me there's a message there to the employer about employing women.
Well, some employers have taken the position that if they are required to cover maternity as any other disability, it'll be a tailwind upon women, that they will try hard to not have a large percentage of their workforce female. But if the studies that indicate that pregnancy coverage is not as expensive as people think, and some indicate 3% of the total employee benefit package is all that would have to be added, there's no real reason for employers to fear that added cost.
So do you feel that pregnancy should be treated like any other illness? Or?
I not only feel that it should be, but I am also clear that it is legally required to be treated. A pregnancy-related disability is required under the law to be treated as any other disability.
What are some of the other aspects of discrimination other than maternity benefits in health insurance plans?
There's often a problem with women getting dependents coverage for their husbands, whereas male employees can get dependents coverage for their wives.
And what does that mean exactly?
Group health insurance plans often provide that the dependent spouse or the spouse of the employee gets coverage similar to the coverage that the employee herself or himself gets. This kind of coverage is often not extended to the husbands of the women employees, even though the wives of the male employees are automatically covered.
I see. What about riders to insurance policies? I think most people probably, first of all, don't understand what they are and what they mean in terms of women's benefits and men's benefits.
Well, riders can include various provisions. There are variations on the terms of the insurance policy that would otherwise apply. Sometimes they expand the rights of the insured, and sometimes they contract the rights of the insured. In this field, riders usually deal with pregnancy, or with female disorders, or disorders related to female reproductive organs. It's often the case that insurance companies will attach a rider that pregnancy is not covered, or that if a woman becomes pregnant, she only gets disability benefits, for example, in a disability policy for a shorter period of time than another person disabled by for some other cause.
Is the individual health policy, not, a person not belonging to a group plan where he or she works, is that different? Does that also discriminate, or what's the situation with that?
The same problems with respect to exclusions of pregnancy and other kinds of disabilities that only women suffer is as real a problem in the case of private health insurance policies as it is with group policies that one receives as an employee in a group. The problems with group insurance policies are more pervasive because most people who have health insurance have them as a member of an employer group rather than as individuals.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about the public for a minute. And what about unemployment and state disability and things like that? Take unemployment first.
All right.
State unemployment, I guess.
Most states have unemployment insurance laws which provide that a person who is involuntarily out of work receives unemployment compensation. Most states have also provided that if a woman who is involuntarily out of work is also pregnant or in the latter stages of pregnancy, she is presumed to not be available for work and therefore doesn't receive unemployment compensation. One of the criteria that is used for entitlement to unemployment insurance is that the individual who's seeking that benefit is ready to go to work, is looking for a job, and is prepared to take a job if one comes along. Many states have assumed that a pregnant woman is not available for work, and therefore, even though she's looking diligently for a job, if she doesn't get one, she doesn't get unemployment insurance either. There have been several court cases now in which federal district courts have held that presumption that a pregnant woman is unavailable for work is a violation of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution.
So then a woman does have some recourse?
A woman certainly does have recourse. As these cases have held, the state may not exclude women merely because they're pregnant and for that reason alone without violating the 14th Amendment. There have been 3 or 4 cases with that holding. We expect that there will be more, and women who are being refused unemployment insurance because they're pregnant should speak to the attorney generals of their states and let them know that that's illegal.
To backtrack for a minute, what recourse does a woman have exactly with this group health insurance, for instance? I mean, can you tell someone exactly step by step what she should do?
The most effective remedy is to file a lawsuit under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. That lawsuit begins with filing a charge with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission administers and enforces Title VII. Virtually every state has some kind of a state law prohibiting sex discrimination in employment. Those are laws that also can be looked to. Some cities also have fair employment practices laws which prohibit sex discrimination in employment. Unfortunately, it's a long, hard road to hoe. Without a private attorney, it takes a long time to vindicate those rights because the public agencies frequently have a huge backlog and take a long time to even commence investigation. So a woman with a complaint of sex discrimination under a private employer's group insurance policy should file a charge with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and try and find a lawyer as soon as possible to hurry the processing along.
Shouldn't she try to go to her employer first, maybe?
That's a course that ought to always be tried before one gets into the litigating process. Sometimes employers will see the light when it's pointed out to them that they're violating the law. That certainly is the best method to pursue first, and if it doesn't work, then one just has to use whatever legal recourse is available.
Which kind do you think affects the most people? Which kind of insurance?
Oh, before I answer that question, let me just add one more thing. The guidelines under Title VII provide that pregnancy disabilities have to be treated the same way as any other disability. That guideline has been upheld in 2 lawsuits already by federal district courts who have held that employers must treat women with pregnancy disabilities the same way they treat other employees with other disabilities for purposes of leave, for purposes of sick pay, for purposes of insurance coverage. Women who are not being treated in the legal manner with respect to pregnancy disabilities should point out to their employers that this is the law and that it's been upheld by 2 courts who have faced the problem, and several other lawsuits are now pending on the same issue.
Which kinds of insurance affect the most people?
Probably with respect to pregnancy kinds of problems, more women are affected by state laws regarding unemployment insurance and disability insurance than they are private insurance plans. In the private insurance sector, more people are covered by group plans than by individual plans.
I see. What about state disability now?
Several states have laws which provide various degrees of income protection for members of the workforce who are temporarily disabled and unable to work for a period of time. California has such a disability program, for example, which gives workers income protection for virtually every disability that one can imagine, including even voluntary surgery, including gunshot wounds, including athletic injuries. Everything is excluded except pregnancy disabilities. A 3-judge court held last fall that that exclusion of pregnancy was sex discrimination, a violation of the 14th Amendment, and stated that California's exclusion of pregnancy was unconstitutional. That case is now pending before the U.S. Supreme Court. It'll be argued shortly, and we should get a decision sometime this term.
Is California the most progressive state in this matter, would you think?
Well, the California courts have done very well when they've been faced with issues of sex discrimination. The California Disability Plan now covers all complications of pregnancy, but the state is still fighting covering the disabilities related to normal pregnancy.
Let's move on to disability insurance, private. Is this generally available to women, do you feel?
Women have a difficult time getting private disability insurance policies at all. As the statement that I read at the beginning indicates, insurance companies have the feeling that women are going to cheat, that they're going to lie, and they're going to malinger, that they don't really need to work and they'll take advantage of insurance policies, disability insurance policies.
Well, what do they base this on?
It's hard to tell what they base it on. We've never really gotten a satisfactory answer from any insurance company, a satisfactory statistical answer justifying the discriminatory treatment of women in disability policies. Not only do women have a hard time getting them at all, but when they do get disability insurance policies, they usually cost more than the same policy for a man, sometimes as much as 150% more. The elimination period is longer, that is the waiting period before benefits begin.
It just occurred to me, perhaps we'd better define a disability policy.
A disability policy provides a certain amount of money per week or per month to the policyholder during the period that that policyholder is disabled, physically disabled or mentally disabled frequently from working. It's an income protection plan, as the California plan that I described earlier is. Depending upon what your income is, you can buy a disability policy that gives you a certain amount of income during periods of disability.
You said something about a time limit.
Yes, there's a period that's called an elimination period, which is the waiting time before benefits begin. If you get sick today, you don't get benefits tomorrow under most disability plans. You get them at some point in the future. For men, it's often as little as a week or two. For women, it's often as much as a month or two, or even longer. Thus, the elimination period is longer for women. In addition to that, men can buy insurance policies, disability policies, that will be in effect for a period of 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, sometimes longer. Women can only buy disability policies which will pay them benefits for a far shorter period of time. There are many circumstances in which a man and a woman identically situated, same job, same income, the man can buy a disability insurance policy that'll be in effect for 5 years, a woman can buy one that'll be in effect for 2 years.
Can they collect under the same circumstances?
No, the definitions of disability are often different as well. The definition of disability for men is typically unable to do his job or his profession. So that if a man is a brain surgeon and has some disability which causes him to not be able to do brain surgery, he collects disability insurance. On the other hand, the definition of disability for women is unable to do any occupation. So if a woman brain surgeon is disabled from doing brain surgery, but she can be a waitress, she is not disabled under the terms of the policy and therefore does not collect any benefits.
Well, that's very startling. I think most people probably don't realize that.
It's a very startling picture, and the insurance companies have failed totally in justifying this disparate treatment. We've discovered, to the extent that there are any statistics comparing disability rates of men and women, those statistics don't support the discriminatory treatment of women at all. For example, the U.S. Department of Labor in 1971 advised us that women on the average miss work on account of sickness 5.2 days per year. Men missed work on account of sickness 5.1 days per year. That hardly justifies the extraordinarily disparate treatment that women and men get at the hands of insurance companies.
What is the cost difference again?
It's often as much as 150% for disability insurance
So then
policies.
really those figures don't justify
They
that
don't
cost.
justify it at all. In addition to that, the practice of the Social Security Administration under the disability laws under Social Security indicates that men have more days of disability per year for which they claim Social Security benefits than women do. Not the same, not slightly less, but in fact more.
That's incredible. What recourse do women have as far as disability insurance?
For state disability plans, there's a cause of action under the 14th Amendment, which is what is currently pending with respect to California. For private disability plans, it's a very difficult cause of action. If one is buying a private plan from a private insurance company, it's difficult to tie the state in sufficiently to get a 14th Amendment cause of action. The New York Civil Liberties Union currently has a lawsuit pending in which they've sued the Commissioner of Insurance in New York under the 14th Amendment.
That brings another point. There is a Commissioner of Insurance in every state, is that true?
I believe there's one in every state. There's one at least in most states. Insurance is highly regulated from state to state.
I wasn't aware of that. I didn't even know that such an office existed until I started doing research for the show.
Well, in order to have a cause of action under the 14th Amendment, the state has got to be involved in the discrimination. The New York Civil Liberties Union's theory is that the Commissioner of Insurance in New York has a legal responsibility to enforce the laws of New York. By approving discriminatory insurance policies, he's not carrying forth his duty. For private insurance plans that are given to employees by employers, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and other fair employment practices laws can be used as a tool to challenge those discriminatory procedures.
Is the Equal Rights Amendment, would the passage of it have any effect on this?
The Equal Rights Amendment would have an effect on governmental disability programs. Whether it would have an effect on private programs would depend upon the extent of the state's involvement in those programs.
I see. Let's talk about Social Security now at this point. How do you feel about that?
There are a number of areas in which women suffer overt sex discrimination under the Social Security laws. Lawsuits are beginning to be brought. The American Civil Liberties Union has so far brought 2. One has been concluded successfully. Another one is still pending. The issues that are being attacked are mainly the problem of a woman who is covered by Social Security, whose payments do not buy the same kind of protection for her dependents and survivors as the contributions of a man provide. In both of these cases, the plaintiff is a man who is not getting what a similarly circumstanced woman would get. So in that case, we have reverse sex discrimination. But it's not only discrimination against the man, it's discrimination against the woman whose Social Security contributions did not buy the same kind of protection for her family that a man's buys.
Is dependency the same as survivor's benefits?
No, there are dependency benefits for the children of a woman covered by Social Security. There are also survivor's benefits for the surviving spouse of a person covered by Social Security. In both of those areas, the surviving husband or the surviving child of a woman who dies do not get the same benefits that a man's family would get unless they can show that she contributed more than half of their support. Men are not put to the same test, and we're challenging that.
Again, what recourse as far as Social Security?
For Social Security, the recourse is a lawsuit under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution for a denial of due process, which includes equal protection and forbids sex discrimination.
Let's move on to automobile insurance. How is there discrimination in this case?
The problem in automobile insurance is even less statistical and even less related to actuarial data than in any other field.
Maybe before we go on, we should define what an actuary table is.
Well, with respect to disability insurance and especially life insurance is probably the easiest thing to deal with initially. An actuarial table indicates when someone who is presently living is likely to die based upon his or her age. A mortality table will tell you how long someone who is now 22 can expect to live, or how long someone who is now 45 can expect to live. Mortality tables are almost always separated on the basis of sex. There's a mortality table for men and a mortality table for women, and women typically live longer than men live.
There's something about, I read in one of the reports that you sent me, something about divorced women having a great deal of trouble getting automobile insurance.
Yes, in the automobile insurance area, the classes of women that have difficulty in obtaining automobile insurance are women who are divorced or separated or living with someone to whom they're not married. There are various kinds of ratings that attach to women if their moral character is called into question. Insurance companies will say that all divorced people are looked on with a jaundiced eye, but it's been our experience that it's the divorced women rather than the divorced men who are most often put into an unassigned risk pool.
Isn't there also some discrimination toward young men who drive cars?
Yes, that's true. There is some I don't know if we want to call it discrimination. It's true that young men often pay a higher premium. The insurance companies justify that on the ground that statistically young men are less safe drivers.
Let's get into pensions and annuities. Now, I know practically nothing about this, so you'll have to define everything.
Pension plans are typically plans in which an employee and an employer, sometimes the employee alone, sometimes the employer alone, sometimes both, contribute to a fund during the course of the employee's working life. At the time the employee retires, the employee receives a certain amount of money every month until he or she dies. Excuse me. The sex discrimination problem in the pension field relates to the fact that women get less money per month than a man who has contributed the same amount and who is the same age. The reason women get less per month is because actuarially it is assumed that she will live longer. And if she gets less per month for a longer period of time, statistically, if she dies when she's supposed to, she'll end up with the same amount of dollars. The problem with that is that even though the statistically average woman will die at, for example, age 73, any particular woman may not die at that age. And the woman is suffering the deprivations of getting less money per month, even though she can take heart in the fact that if she's statistically average, she'll live long enough so that it all evens out. She's getting less per month and suffering the deprivations that old people suffer on living on a limited income merely because she's a woman.
What's an annuity?
An annuity is typically bought with a lump sum of cash. Sometimes it's paid out over a period of time. And once the annuity is paid for, the recipient, the holder of the annuity, the policy holder of the annuity, also receives a certain amount of money per month for life. And in the annuity area also, women get less per month because they're presumed to live longer.
Okay, we have one more area and we have 2 minutes about life insurance. Is it true that women are apt not to take out life insurance policies on themselves?
I think that the life insurance situation is typical of the problem, one of the main problems with women in insurance. Women typically don't take out life insurance policies because they just don't think they need them. Women don't think of themselves as commercial beings and fail to protect themselves against what might possibly happen in the future. However, even when a woman does think of taking out life insurance policy, she often has a difficult time. Insurance companies often set limits on the maximum amount of life insurance a woman can buy, and that limit is typically less than a man in the same circumstances can buy.
Do they give reasons for that?
The only reasons that are given are that women are the dependents of their husbands typically, and they don't have the need for life insurance that men have. Not only is the upper limit set, but often that upper limit is determined on the basis of the amount of life insurance the husband has. The whole treatment of women is a blindness to the fact that women are living in the world, that they're working, that they have responsibilities, and that they aren't the creatures of the 19th century who do nothing in the commercial world and do nothing but stay home and take care of children.
Is there one kind of life insurance that's better for women than another? Is term better? Is straight better?
No, I don't think that any particular kind is better for women as a class. Women have the same considerations in deciding what kind of life insurance they ought to buy as men do. It depends as much upon their circumstances, their financial and their social circumstances, as it does for men.
In the 1 minute we have left, let's talk about who regulates the insurance industry. Is it the state? Is it the federal government?
It's primarily the state. Insurance is a highly regulated industry, and in many cases insurance companies are regulated in order to implement social policies. The insurance companies have for many years now not been permitted to use race-segregated mortality tables. Even though black people tend to live shorter lives than white people, a policy decision has been made that that's not a valid reason to discriminate in rates and premiums against black people. It's the position of the American Civil Liberties Union, at least, that that kind of social regulation is something that ought to be applied in the field of sex discrimination. There is as little reason to discriminate against women on the ground of statistical data as there is to discriminate against black people on the ground of
Kathleen,
statistical
we're out of
data.
time. I thank you very much. We've had a lot of information. Thank you, and good night from Woman.